Melanie Jones, who is our student representative at the Board of Education, will give her special welcome for the students.
On behalf of all the students at Berkeley High School, and particularly those of us who will be able to hear you today, I'd like to extend the warmest of welcomes. And in expression of our gratitude for your visit today, we'd like to give you this token of our appreciation.
Should I stand or sit?
You have to speak loud and
Well, can you all hear me? Can you? Okay. Can you all see me? Anyway, I'm glad to be here. I don't have a lecture, and I really came to listen to you. I mean, I know about me, more or less. But to kick it off, it was suggested that I say some words about how I grew up. And that may be important because I'm beginning to realize that, well, I knew it, but I'm beginning to realize it all over again, that really the world in which I grew up, for someone your age, must seem almost biblical in its distance, and in any case was a very different world. I was born in 1924 in Harlem Hospital. My father was a preacher from New Orleans. My mother was a girl from Maryland. I'm sorry. And I'm the oldest of 9 children. When I was growing up, the world was bounded by what I knew of Harlem. Later on, when I started to work, not very much later on, when I went downtown, I could see the difference between my father's house, my mother's kitchen, and the places where I worked. I could see, therefore, what I'm saying is what white Americans thought not only of me, but thought of my mother and my father, my brothers and my sisters. And we were told when I was growing up that we had no past and never contributed anything to civilization, and that Africa was a rather damp and dangerous continent. We were lucky to have been saved from it, where we would have been cannibals if we'd stayed. This all seemed very strange to me, because my father did not agree with that at all. My father was a very religious man. He was also a very, very, very bitter and proud man. And what white Christians said to me had nothing whatever to do with how my father came home from work, trembling with rage, dangerous with rage, dangerous with pain. And I was too young to realize what a black cat's working day was like until, of course, my working day began. And I would come home wanting to murder somebody. And it's very, very dangerous because it turns against you and you really want to murder yourself. And what you're reacting to on many, many levels is the white world's estimate of you and the limbo in which they place you, or placed me then, because if you have no past, then clearly you have no future. And then to try to deal with white boys and girls in school, in the streets, became a very, very, very difficult matter because I didn't hate them. I hated the cops. I hated the landlords. I hated some of my teachers. But it was difficult, and I fought with a lot of boys my age, but that's not the same thing as hating them. Well, time passes. In one way or another, you get through somehow what you have to get through. In some ways, I was sad because all the children whom I had to be responsible, because my father died so soon. Eventually, I went to Paris to prevent myself from being murdered or committing murder, and to finish my first book. So I could prove to my brothers and sisters that at least I was trying to get something done. Because you got to remember too, that where I was born, when I was born, the idea of being a black writer had never entered anybody's head. And as far as I knew then, there'd never been a black writer in the entire history of the world. But I discovered different things, different libraries, finally in different countries. And in a way, when I left this country 30 years ago, I was able to see it for the first time. I was able to forgive it for the first time. And I was able to understand something very, very difficult to explain, but my relationship with the English language altered when I was in France because I was living in a kind of silence. And in that silence, I didn't speak any French and didn't know anybody. In that silence, I began to hear the language which had really produced me. That is to say, every black writer, on one level or another, is forced to have a quarrel with the English language, with the assumptions of the English language. My father, for example, did not exist in Shakespeare's English. Neither did my mother. Neither, for that matter, did I. But I knew that my father was not black-hearted, and I knew that my mother was not as black as sin. I knew that white was not the color of virtue, it might be the color of death. And I began to hear my father's voice in that silence, and the music which produced me, and the blues, and the gospel, and the spirituals, and the beat of black speech. As black people speak in a cadence. It's a very particular, very special thing which exists nowhere else as far as I know in the world. And part of that is because black people have always had to say something. I've had to say to my brother, for example, actually and historically, while the captain or the cop is listening, I got to say something to my brother, but my brother understands and the cop don't. And that's one of the ways the language which black people speak was formed, and it's one of the things that formed us. It is a mystery, however, and this is sad thing to have to say, but the language which I'm talking about, so what am I talking about? It's a black experience in this country. It's still a mystery and a threat for most of the people in this country who think of themselves as white. I suggest, by the way, I think the whole vocabulary has got to be overhauled, but I think it might be useful for white people and for black people to think of it this way. I think white people are an invention, and they were invented in America. They were not white in Russia, or in Italy, or in Greece, or in France, or in England. They got on boats and came across the ocean, and for the first time, they became white. They became white here because I was here. And therefore I had to be black. I had to be black in order to justify the crimes being committed against me. Now, that's a very heavy inheritance if you're black. It's a very, very heavy inheritance if you're white. And since we are in this country together, and not a single man or woman in this country can prove he or she is white, we've been here together so long that we're going to have to learn how to live with each other. Now, it is your generation, much more than my own, on whom this burden falls. You are the generation to whom the world belongs, to whom the future belongs. This century has 20 years to go, and some of you will be approaching 30 at that time, and some of you will not be past 40. And in the very same way that the world in which I was born is unimaginable for any of you. Now, what is coming when you will be the actors on the stage is unimaginable now, but it is something that you will have to bring about. The world is not white. The slave trade is going to end. The economic undergirding of the Western world has always been slave labor, and the Western world is in a crisis because it is losing its slaves. There's a new personality being evolved on the African continent with which future generations will have to deal, you first of all, and the bridge between Africa and us has to be established by your generation, and a new generation will come out of you, which may begin, after all, which may be the beginning of the new world we've been trying to establish for so long. Because I'm not a pessimist. I believe that the people who have endured what we have endured for so long have nothing whatever to be afraid of, and I count on you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so we'll field your questions, whatever you want to ask. Gentleman over there.
Could you talk briefly about the relationship between the poison and the antidote and the educated son?
I'm sorry. The gentleman, the boy, asked me if I would discuss the question of the antidote and the poison, which comes from Notes of a Native Son. And the poison was, I was speaking about the poison of rage, of self-hatred, and the difficulty of finding an antidote.
Father was achieving?
Well, my father was trying to achieve that, yes. But by the time I wrote that, I had become very much like my father and had really tried to kill somebody and realized that I was going to have to deal with this poison and try to find an antidote to it, but I would never, never, never fully recover from this rage, and the battle with self-hatred was something I would have to fight. And I suppose the antidote is the realization that it is finally up to you, you know, because the world meant to destroy me, let us put it that way, and would really have succeeded if I had destroyed myself. You see, the world's judgment begins on the outside. You know, you're called a nigger by the world. But later on, that judgment is interiorized, it becomes inside, and you call yourself a nigger. And then, of course, the world has accomplished its dirty work. So what you have to do is walk out of the world's definitions. Does that make sense to you?
What do you think of the white liberal?
As little as possible.
All right, the question was, what do you think of the white liberal? Okay, this gentleman back here.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'd like to elaborate on black progress as he sees it now compared to back whenever.
Did everybody get that?
You understood that? Yeah. Black progress. Well, there are two kinds, to be honest with you, the word progress has to be used with great care, because what the white world means by progress, when they speak about black people, what they mean by progress is how white you become, how fast. That's what the word progress means in the American White Dictionary. Now that is an unacceptable progress since in the first place. Even if I wish to be white, I ain't. And it means giving up too much. The progress which I envision and which you represent is involved with the realization that the past which produced you makes of you a very high-priced item. You were paid for. Your fathers and your fathers' fathers and fathers' fathers paid for you to be here. That is, if you like, progress. What you do with it, do you understand me, is progress. But for the word progress, I would prefer the word consciousness, you know, because we have had to discover who we are.
You're saying that it's not progress in terms of what we acquire with our consciousness, our mental consciousness.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Well, where are we on that one?
Where are we on that one?
Well, where do you think how far along do you think we've come? Or do you think that do you think we are moving in a kind of a ascending level, or have we reached a plateau, or what?
I think I can't prove this, but my vibes tell me that we're ascending, but we don't have any choice, for one thing. You know, we're not gonna die out now. You know, and there's nothing. And you see, the trouble is too. The trouble is that there's nothing in the country to tempt you. I mean, I can live without a Cadillac.
Okay. All right. Okay, Valerie.
I want to ask a question. What's your give of your own opinion, right? About what is some advice that you can give young people today on ways of rebelling from getting this quote unquote brainwash, or how do you suggest we improve our ways of consciousness? You know, like in the 60s, they got do this kind of thing, like, you know, by buying out people. How do you suggest, not letting that happen the next time we do have whatever kind of change there, is in the future?
Well, you asked me, frankly, a question which I know I cannot really answer, you know. But it seems to me one thing is that it's so obvious that one overlooks it. We have each other. Black people have a relationship to each other which is very, very special. However stormy it may be, but you know that your brother is your brother and your sister is your sister. You know, one is not confused about that, which means that you have a certain kind of strength against the brainwashing. You're talking about the brutal pressure to make you conform or to perish. You know, no one has a formula. You know, no one can give you a formula as to how to avoid or overcome that, except by trusting your own experience, the experience that has produced you so far. You know, and your ability to make your own choices, and the knowledge that in any case, you know, you're going to have to pay a price for it. You know, the point is to make it your price. You know, the point is that you have to decide which is most important to you, the standards of this republic or you. You know, I mean, when I say the standards of this republic, I mean the American standards, what most Americans think they want to become, what most Americans have become, the kind of choices most Americans have made. You know, you have to examine that in the light of your own experience, which is your only bulwark, if you see what I mean, against the oppression you're talking about, because the bulk of the white co-citizens can't help it. There's a reflex when they look at you, coming out of their history, you know, coming out of their guilt, coming out of their panic, because they know you're not supposed to be here. You know, and you are here, and you're not going to go anywhere. So that you're stronger than they are. Something you had to know from the get-go. You see what I mean? You have nothing to prove. You have something to do. You know, it's up to you to survive, surmount. Do that make sense to you?
Yeah, but I don't think it was completely answered. To see what I meant is as far as like, are you talking about an individual like, you know, analyzing out those questions that you can just say that in their own question, as far as trying to, you know, figure out exactly what is oppressing them? But I'm saying, you know, like on your own personal opinion, and I understand what you said, you know, you can't truly answer it.
That's right.
But, you know, what do you think it can be done by one person? Just realize, because I know, like, through your book, just one person touched a lot of people, right? But I'm just saying, you know, as far as like individuals who might not have the talent of writing, that kind of thing, right? But, you know, how do you suggest they express their opinions, you know?
Well, you're doing a very good job of it right now, you know. And this one person, you know, you're speaking about me, this one person was never one person, you know. I was paid for too. And without my brothers and my sisters, my mother and my father, I would not be standing, you know, sitting here. You understand what I mean?
Okay, right here.
Okay, you spoke of your father, of our father's progress. What about our mothers? Did you feel that?
I wasn't being sexist. No, I wasn't.
I'd like to hear your views on that, the women's progress.
Well, it comes, really, you know, in the context in which I'm speaking, when I said fathers, 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 I could equally have said mothers, 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 you know. Because one would not exist without the other. You know, what my mother had to go through to take care of my father and to raise 9 children, maybe, you know, I should have spelled it out, but it goes without saying. You know, she had a tough row to hoe. And so did her mother, you know. I mean, what I'm saying is that I know that. You know, I don't think that it's implicit in what I was saying.
But I was speaking more of the progress that you were speaking of, this generation. And do you feel that this is a generation when women are, their struggle's also going to show, and it's going to be, they're going to be more than equal?
Yeah, but I'm not, I understand what you're saying. And the struggle of women in this country, or women in the world, is, well, on one hand, it's a very obvious struggle. You know, the way women have been treated by men for generations and used as things by men, the way that women have been controlled by men's imaginations for all these years. On the other hand, a woman is not a man, you know. And I'm perfectly willing to say that a woman is obviously equal, but she's also special, you know. She's special only because she can have the baby, you know. And we can't, you know, we're indispensable. And your progress is always being, you know, I don't think that a woman wants to progress beyond her womanhood, which means that I'm indispensable to you too. What you're really talking about is the difference in the relationship between men, the difference in a clearer relationship between men and women, I think.
Just in keeping with that one, do you see that there is a difference in the kinds of experiences that black women have gone through and the kind of struggles that they're going to have to wage, as opposed to what white women have gone through and what white women are going to have to do?
No, that's also something. That's something in a way obvious and another way not obvious. Because I don't want the struggle of my mother or the struggle of my sister, or my nieces. A black girl's struggle, a black woman's struggle, is a very different one from a white girl's struggle. So we got to face that. It's only because, from a social point of view, the white woman has different options, different temptations, is far more protected no matter how she complains. Every black girl, on the other hand, was born with a bad reputation, you know, and because she's black. You know, every black man was born with a bad reputation. and has until he's 80 when he's finally an uncle. And before that, he's Tom, not uncle. And he's got a sex. And that's one of the things that the Republic is most frightened of. And white women then have been manipulated historically to murder black men. And one of the things the women's liberation movement has to take into account is how many times I was castrated in your name. And until you can deal with that, I take a very dim view of your liberation.
Only a woman would think of this, that Mr. Baldwin would not take on the coaching.
Oh, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, right over there. Yeah. Katrina, yeah.
What I wanted to ask you was, based on here you talk about as far as Africa and slavery and things, and the way I see it now, there's a mental slavery going among folks right here, and in the future, are you planning to write another book as of 1979 as far as the mental slavery that's going through folks' minds, as far as this brainwashing and this changes as far as folks are going through? Are you planning to do that in the future?
Well, I'm trying to do that right now, in fact. I know what you're talking about. It's a kind of schizophrenia and it's a kind of paralysis too. But as long as you're aware of it, you see, what I believe is this: if you can face it, if you can see it, then you can fight it. If you see what I mean. I'm very worried about what you're talking about, and I'm very worried about the young people this age, who are now in the streets of Harlem, for example, or in the streets of New York, who have no future, who have no schooling, who have no jobs. And this is not an act of God. This is absolutely deliberate, And the question is what to do about it, how to change it. So I depend on, I know that I can't do it, you can't do it, but I know that we have to do it. Does that make sense to you? So you can't afford to be so confused, because there are too many people who need all the clarity you can manage. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, right over here.
Mr. Baldwin, I don't mean to be critical of you at all, because I think I really believe a lot of what you're saying, but you've also been talking in a whole lot of generalities, be it black and white, conformist, non-conformist, whatever. And I see a lot of what you're talking about as you're talking about maybe like a liberation of spirit, so people can be who they want to be and express their individualism. But I think that in your talking in generalities, you're also maybe falling victim to the criticism that you're making that people aren't allowed to express their individuality, because I guess general philosophy and making stereotypes of people more or less, that definitely does not contribute to individualism. And I want to know if, I'm aware that you don't think that there aren't individuals and that there aren't exceptions to the case, but I'm just curious why you don't bring up some of the other aspects of the black philosophy and of the white philosophy, and why there has to be such a distinction.
Well, I follow you, in a sense I can only speak in generalities, because what you're asking, otherwise you're asking me to do something I'm not equipped to do. I'm not a leader, I'm not a politician. What I'm asking is the redefinition of terms. But I'm not the one to redefine your terms. All I can do is try to make you think about them. We can argue about it, but the terms I'm talking about have to be defined by you. It is your life. I'm not that kind of teacher. All I can do is make you mad at me, make you think, but the rest is up to you. And when I talk about black and white, I'm not really talking about stereotypes. I'm talking about two levels of experience. And I did say it would be useful to consider that, to look on white people as an invention, because that is in fact what they are, you know. And the reason I put it that way is because it is a very crippling matter. You know, it's more hidden in the case of white people than it is in the case of black people. But it's a great paradox. But it's a very crippling matter to go through the world with the options offered a white person. One think of white as being also a moral choice, which one makes, you know, which is up to you again to make. You know, it's one fights your individuality. You know, I can help you fight for it, but it's you who fight for it. It's you who pay for it, and it's you who define it, not me. If you follow me.
All right, Bryson.
Yeah, I would like to first speak on the contrast of struggles of black male and black female. It's clear that if society takes care of the black male and successfully emasculating him, then the women will, you know, catch residuals, and if they don't want no man, it's not willing to be a man. Now, in your efforts, in the limbo that you spoke of earlier, that you were thrown into by the white world, was it one particular factor or factors that kept you from, you know, just giving up and saying, well, you know, I can just end it all right now and I'm free?
Well, there was, in that limbo, where you had to make your own choices, even though you have to make your own choices in the teeth of all the danger. I mean,
was it that inner thing that said, that told you, you know, you have to do what you have to do, and like you said, you didn't know actually become a writer.
That's right.
I mean, you just putting down what you see about things, and they classify you as a writer. So you think that was the...
No, I don't. It's a question no one can really answer. Something my father gave me. My father and I didn't get along, but something he gave me, and it's hard to describe it, but watching him go under frightened me, it hurt me. But even though my father was broken, you know, it took a lot to break him, and after all, I was his son, you know, and I didn't want him to go for nothing. I was not only his son, but I was the oldest of all his children, you know. And my bitterness turned to pride. My pride turned into a cold determination not to let it happen again. And my father, after all, had counted on me not to let it happen again. So that answers you at all, you know. I'm not asking you to do it.
Well, it's not, you said, you know, we've got to learn, you know, live with each other and...
Yes. What, I know what you're saying.
There's a gap.
Yeah, what you think I'm saying is a matter of exclusion. When I talk about black experience, you think I'm excluding you. You know, in fact, black experience is simply universal experience. You know, it happens to be in this country, in this time and place, a crucial matter, because what black experience means to white people, in the generality, is frightening. You know, it isn't that they don't understand. White person cannot understand my testimony. You know, it isn't that he doesn't understand what happened to my father. It's that in order to understand it, he has to move beyond the category in which he is trapped, just as much as I am trapped, and in a way more, because he can get through his life, or he thinks he can, without examining the category in which he is also a victim. Do you understand me?
I get you.
Well, in South Boston, for example, the school crisis in South Boston, the poor Irish who are battling with the niggers, you know, battling the black people, have no idea that what they are really doing is insisting on their own imprisonment. You know, and it works. For the bosses, it's absolutely ideal, because now they have a perfect excuse. You know, white people have been manipulated in this country in a terrifying way. And not by me, but your fathers were terrified by me because, and you were manipulated by the people you worked for, because they could always get sambo. You know, I would be forced to work for less. So your fathers, my fathers, fought it out in the streets, and one of us found out what happened. But most white people have not found out what happened, you know? And what I'm suggesting, when I'm talking about black consciousness, is not a matter of excluding you, it's the same challenge that you have to face. All right?
Thank you. All right. Okay, any question?
I'd like to ask you, who inspired you or what inspired you to start writing?
I started writing when I was a little boy, but I didn't think it was, I didn't think it was very important. I didn't really start writing until I left home, till I was like 17. And when my father died, when I was about 19. And it was because that experience, you know, was so maligned, so despised, you know, that I had to, and because it had cost me something too, but I had to try to articulate it, you know, to get to the church, my father, my mother, and myself, in some kind of coherent relationship to each other, so that I would have the strength, you know, to grow up. All right?
You said that you had determination. Okay, while writing, have you ever been criticized while writing?
Oh, yes, you can.
Okay, has that ever gave you the urge to just quit and leave it alone because of the criticism?
No, never.
Okay, Melody?
I saw a movie about your child life, and you said you read everything you can get your hands on such a Bible. I wanted to know what.
Oh, well, yeah, my father was a preacher, and he insisted that I read the Bible, so naturally I didn't, you know. And I read every book. There were two libraries in Harlem when I was growing up, one on 135th Street, one on 124th Street. And I read every book in both those libraries by the time I was 13. I know that because they had to give me a grown-up card when I was 13 to go downtown to 42nd Street. And after I read the Bible much later.
Okay.
Is it possible for you to cite writers other writers that you read a lot of or perhaps were influenced by, ones that had special importance for you?
Well, when I was young, but this is very provisional, in spite of what I just said, the Bible, Dostoevsky, Dickens, Dostoevsky most, perhaps. Dostoevsky and the Bible. But that's a very difficult question to answer because on another level, it wasn't writers so much as musicians that from whom I learned the most.
Could you state some of those?
Not really, you know, but I can, you know, people like Fats Waller, people like W.C. Handy, you know. I'm talking about my childhood, Louis Armstrong. Then later on, people like Charlie Parker, you know, Miles Davis, Aretha, but that was much, much later. When I was young, I'm talking about the red parties, you know, used to, in Harlem, the piano, you know, the funky down home, you know, 30s years.
Okay.
You said that when you started writing, you weren't really any influence of black writers, right? Did you ever, I mean, when you went into writing, did you have that fear that if you didn't succeed in writing, what would you do? And I mean, what would you have done with this fear?
Well, to tell you the truth, I was afraid for a very long time. A very long time. But there was nothing I could do except live with it. You know, I knew that if I didn't become a writer, I'd probably die.
Right, because you said that you started writing to get out all your frustration.
And also make something real to myself, to describe it, so I wouldn't be at the mercy of it.
Yeah.
I'd like to get on the subject of brainwashing again. I'd like to ask you two questions. What do you say about TV and like the Bible? You know, like TV, that's a big brainwash. You know, like they got black movies on where with black people, with poor people, you don't want no progress in life. And then they may have like stories. You know, white people, they having problems in the story, but you know, they dress nice, they got nice houses up on the hills here, you know, and they're together, they're loving their families, you know, but they have no black movies, you know, where it's a nice black family together, loving each other, trying to do the best for each other, to give us, you know, so we can see that and, you know, I like to make us go on that type of road. And I think TV is a type of brainwash, you know, maybe the biggest one of them all. I like to ask you, what do you say about that?
Well, you've answered it, you know. You left me very little to say. Except what you have to bear in mind is that it's deliberate. You know, I was raised, after all, in terms of the people, the white people I'm talking about now, who my teachers, etc. I was raised to believe I was a slave. You know, for example, I took my baby sister to see Paul Ropes, and when he finally got back from England or wherever he'd been, after the 10-year battle he had in this country, when he couldn't work in the country and wasn't allowed out of the country. It's true. I took her to see him when she was a little girl, just so she could see him, so she would know that if there's a black man like that in the world, you know, that is why you have the situation comedy on TV, which is designed to make you think that you ain't worth nothing. And that's deliberate and that's a crime.
Yeah, you speak a lot about the white world, and it seems to me that you think that the black person must conform to a set of values if they want to be quote-unquote accepted in the black world, in the white world. I'd like to know if you actually think there are a set of white values, and if so, if they differ from black values.
Well, okay. Historically and actually speaking, for instance, my friend over there not long ago, progress in this country as relates to black people is gauged by how white you manage to become, you know. And the penalties in this country for being black are astronomical, always have been, are terribly, terribly brutal. And furthermore, the game is rigged. You can't possibly win it, you know. You can learn how to drink martinis perfectly. You can drive a Mercedes-Benz, you know, and have a $30,000 a year job or whatever, and you're still a nigger. The country is built on that. That is why my friend's discussion of TV, of the TV situation, is so telling and it's so true, you know. It means that every black life in this country has always been menaced, you know, and that we have had to forge our experience in spite of our countrymen. You see what I'm saying? And as for white values are filtered, first of all, to a black person in a very brutal way. Your white values, when you're a little black boy or a little black girl, are simply indicated by the way you're treated. You know, the way your mother's treated, the way your father's treated. And that's all you know about white values for a very long time. You know? And that's not my fault. That's the way the country is, you know. And it's up to you, then, to overhaul those values and consider your relationship to yourself and to me. Okay?
Yeah, how do you feel like black families today compared with black families when you were in your childhood? How could you use some kind of type of comparison?
It's very difficult to do because, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
He asked for a comparison of black families when Mr. Baldwin was a child and black families today.
I was about to say that's a little difficult to do because, for example, if you were born in 1924, I was born in New York in 1924. That is because my father had been driven out of the South to the North by the wave of terror which hit the South after the First World War. That means that I am really a Southerner born in the North. I was raised by a Southern family. That was my frame of reference. My brother's children were born in the North, and that's another family altogether. One of the differences would be that when I was growing up, every child on the block was belonged to all the grown-ups on the block. So if somebody saw me doing something I shouldn't do, they'd whip me and take me home and I get another whipping. and that's no longer true. If you see what I mean, because the urban reality is another one. That's one of the reasons so many people are going back to the South. So, that's a difficult question to answer. I know I haven't answered it. You see what I'm trying to say.
Okay. So, do I understand you saying that you think that positive, that it was a positive, this what the black family had that they brought from the South with them, that's in the South?
Yeah.
Okay.
With all the criticism of what kind of criticism you got being black and being a writer, and what have you done with it? How do you do it?
Will you speak up, yeah?
What kind of criticism have you gotten, and how do you deal with it?
What kind of criticism have I gotten, and how do I deal with it? As a writer. Yeah, sorry. Well, I don't know where to start. Well, let me put it this way. This comes back to something I was saying to my friend over there. When my first novel was published, which is Go Tell It on the Mountain, which takes place, which is about a holy roller or family in the church. And it's also about the move from the South to the North. Well, the critics were very kind to me, because I was very young. It was an expected story. It was perfectly logical that a black boy would write that story. But it was not, according to me, possible for me to write it again. In short, I was already categorized as a certain kind of writer who write Go Tell It on the Mountain forever. Well, I didn't do that, And that's when the criticism begins, and it's very bewildering criticism. You're bitter. That's the thing I got most, And it's very bewildering during the 60s sometimes to be, on Wednesday to be accused of being bitter, by a white cat, and then turn around and be accused of being Uncle Tom by a black cat. So I finally had to forget all about both criticisms and do my work.
Okay. Good. All right. Alan, Buddha?
This question is kind of related to some of the other questions. I was wondering what you feel like are the conditions in the future of self-hatred that blacks are, been a part of for so long.
I didn't quite understand the question, did you?
Self-hatred, that's been part of black history, what kind of changes and what is it like do you see right now, and what kind of future do you think we'll have?
Well, I think, in spite of all appearances, did you understand the question? The question was about self-hatred, and you were really comparing the past, the present, and the future. What do I think of that? What will happen to that self-hatred in the future? I think that the self-hatred that I was speaking of before, this is only my opinion, but it's what I pick up. I think it's much less. than it was. I think it has taken another form. I think that, you know, the advent of the drugs in the ghetto, the dumping of drugs in the ghetto, you know, was designed again to destroy black people, you know. And a lot of boys and girls went on the needle because they did not know what else to do. You understand what I'm saying? But I don't think, you see, I don't think that looking at your face, I don't think that you will have to fight, as I had to fight, to get out of the nightmare of the white man's mind. Yes, I'm sure it will continue. I think the future, I really mean what I say, I think the future belongs to you.
In your book, Milton Davis' Son, in your essay, Stranger in the Village, at the end of, when you were in Switzerland, you ended the essay, you said that the world is no longer white, and will never be white or do it richly.
Exactly what I said. I'm sorry.
He said in one of his essays, Stranger in the Village, he ended the essay by saying the world is no longer white and will never be white again. And she asked, what did he mean by that?
And I said, well, I remember what I said. But I was, the essay is really a kind of examination. I first attempted to examine where I really come from. When I was wandering around Europe and looking at all those monuments in Europe, which had nothing whatever to do with me. And I had to liberate myself from that whole theology, you know, and recognize where I came from, and put it in some kind of, you know, and once you really look at it, yes, you can say that this world is white no longer, and never be white again. You follow?
All right, back here. Yeah.
What do you think of the quote-unquote free elections in Rhodesia?
Oh, come on. What do I think of the free elections in Rhodesia? I think seriously, it is one of the worst, you know, one of the worst hypes ever, you know, one of the worst frauds ever perpetrated. And it's going to have disastrous and bloody consequences. You know, it's simply not going to work. Obviously, it's not going to work. You know, and that part of Africa is in for a very difficult time. But the English are going, you know, but Africa's going to go through a lot before Europe finally gets out of there. Europe has to go first. Do you understand me?
Okay, William?
Yeah, you talked about the struggle of being a young black writer. And I want to know what caused you to break out of that struggle.
What?
I want to know what caused you to break out of that struggle, to try to project the black views and the black experience. And if so, if that was why, what made you do it? What caused the change? What insight did you see from that?
It's very hard. Did you hear the question? Well, he asked me what caused me to, I'm paraphrasing your question, I'm going to see if I understood it. What caused me to try to project, you know, to break out of the struggle of the young black writer and try to project the black experience and consciousness, yeah. Did they hear it now? He asked me what caused me to, how I broke out of the struggle of being a young black writer and what made me try to project black consciousness. I keep coming back to my father, you know, which is rather strange because my father did not want me to be a writer. He wanted me to be a preacher. But the battle I had with him was crucial to me. You know, it was a very painful battle, and because my father had been so victimized, I suppose I wanted to redeem his experience. You know, the world had despised my father, and they tried to kill him, and finally did kill him. And I wanted to somehow redeem that experience. And once I tried to do that, I couldn't possibly turn back. You know what I mean?
You said that when your father
died, you started writing.
Yeah.
You said he was your major writing influence?
Well, it was a major influence on me as a man, as a boy and as a man. He taught me how to fight. That's what I should. That's the truth. And listening to my father and the things he had to go through helped me later when I had to fight. You see what I mean? And I didn't want to tell any lies to my brothers and my sisters either. No, that was more important to me than Madison Avenue or, what the world thinks it can offer you. I had to live with myself and I had to live with them. Does that make sense to you?
We're right over in the corner.
Yes, I would like to project an abstract question to which I haven't had a clear answer yet. I do dabble in economics, but I would like to know another person's opinion of which, if infinite economic stability was given to the common person, I mean the proletariat on us, then would this release a lot of the pressures that are upon, say, every person in America today?
If economic stability were given to everybody, would that be, if economic stability were given to everyone, would that release us from some of the pressures we live under? Well, yes, I think the answer to that, is obvious. Except it's not likely to come about for a while. But in order for that to happen, the whole economic system will have to be changed.
Okay, and as a corollary to that, if everyone had economic stability in America, would then the ills of racism wither away? It would help. It may be a little too simple to put it that way, but it would certainly help, yes. It would give people one less thing to be afraid of. Melody?
This is one of your quotes. Of fiscal attitude, there are only two, for and against. I find it difficult. You said that you found it difficult to say which one gave you the most pain again. Can you tell me which one? Can you tell me now which one gave you the most pain?
What she's referring to something I wrote a long time ago when I was talking about the celebrated Negro problem. That's what it was called then. And I said that there are only two traditional attitudes, either for or against. And I didn't know which one caused me the most pain. I was being a little sardonic, I was terribly tired. I was terribly tired of walking into various liberal offices and being patted on the head and people saying, "How are you?" and "How's your mother?" And they didn't care about me or my mother, But they were liberals, and they were supposed to like black people, or against the cop on the corner of the landlord. But between the two, the one who was for you and the one who was against you were both killing you. Neither one had any remote conception of who you really were. You were treated like what you were. You understand what I'm saying?
I would like to know, what are the racial differences between the United States and Europe, and particularly between black and white?
The racial differences between America and Europe, particularly in relations between black and whites. Well, there's one great difference between Europe and America, or what seems to be, and that is that Europe had its slaves in various colonies far away, so that no Frenchman or Englishman or Dutchman, ever really saw a black person, though it was that labor that was making them rich. And no Dutchman, therefore, no Englishman, ever had to say, "Would you like your sister to marry one?" Because you never saw them. America had slaves on the mainland, and nobody could avoid them. Nobody could avoid taking an attitude toward him. Either you lynched him or you didn't. You thought he was inferior or you thought he was a man, but he was a presence in the country, in the social fabric of the country, in the psyche of the country. And he is, in fact, the only thing that happened here. The American paranoia in relation to black people is one of the historical facts or centers of American life. It is only beginning to happen in Europe now that way, because the slaves have left the colonies. You know, all those people that England went around the world saying, "Oh, come on and be English with me," you know, all over the world. Now that the sun can't find the British Empire and all those people are coming to London, London is blown up. It's blowing up. No one in the Western world can deal with their former slaves. That's the crisis. And what is happening here is having an effect there and vice versa. In short, the Western party is a very organized party, and when I am in Europe, for example, or when you are in Europe, the Frenchman won't bother you, or the English won't bother you, you know, the Dutch won't bother you. They ain't got to bother you. They know that Uncle Sam will take care of you. You know, that's the way that works.
All right, just gentleman back there.
When you say that drugs in the ghettos are delivered and planned, by who?
By whom? Thank you. Look, we know there is some connection, you know, between the government and big business. We know that the ghetto, for those who own it, is a profit-making organization. And we know, too, that the government don't want no bad niggas. So it would simplify matters if you get them all stoned, which is precisely what happened.
I'd like to know, okay, when you first left this country, like for Europe,
Yes, that's right, yeah, to France.
were you pretty widely acclaimed there? I mean, were you known?
No.
Well, how did they accept you? How did they look upon you?
He's asking.
Send me off, go and feed. Know me and a rat, but me I go there for the cheese. Do that up on my back, and you know them off for eat. So don't test me kill your blood clean. Yeah, hear me? Me send me off, go and feed. Know me and a rat, but me I go there for the cheese. Do that up on my back, and you know them off for eat. So don't test me kill your blood clean. From the gully, get the youths I come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets, them we study. I count up the cash, tell mum if you not worry. I pray a different part and I chat it in a hurry from the gully. Get the youths I come up from the gully. Don't take talk on the streets, let me study. I count up the cash, tell mum if you not worry. I pray a different part and I chat it in a hurry. It started that first Christmas, ain't really get shit I asked for. My wish list was feeling typed down. So bro, she said they hit